Conference, and when we say we're moving forward for Spectrum Management Conference, it's time for our next session. र हाम्रो अर्को session रहेको छ Emerging Mobile Technologies, and that is what we are going to be discussing for this panel. We are 15 minutes late than what we have scheduled, so we'll be, hopefully we all will be on time this time, including the 15 minutes that we have already taken. I'd like to also request everyone who are outside to please join us in, because we're ready to start the program. And as we begin with our speakers. First, I'd like to invite on stage our moderator. And I'd like to invite Mr. C. Mani Chaulagai. C. Mani Chaulagai is an expert. He holds an engineering degree and MPA from the prestigious universities. He possesses over 25 years of international expertise in the ICT domain. Formerly, he has worked at Nepal Telecom multinationals in Europe, APAC, and South Asia in different capacities for over 10 years. While he was abroad, he was engaged in doing business with various world-class telecom in various countries. After returning to Nepal, he has worked as the CEO of one of the telecom operators from 2009 till 2012. Later, he served as the board member of Nepal Telecommunications Authority, NTA, for 5 years. And I'd like to invite him here, a huge round of applause, Mr. C. Mani Chaulagai, expert, the moderator for this session. Likewise, I'd like to invite, we have our speakers, and as a speaker, Dr. Pradeep Paudel, Deputy Director, NTA. Dr. Pradeep Paudel received a PhD degree in Telecommunications Engineering from Roma Tre University, Italy. He also holds an executive MBA from Pokhara University. He has been working in NTA since 2011 and is currently a Deputy Director of the Regulation Department. He is also a part-time faculty member at different universities in Nepal. He has published more than a dozen research papers in international journals and conferences and serves as a reviewer for prestigious international journals and conferences. His current research interest includes telecommunication, technologies, and policy. A huge round of applause for Dr. Pradeep Paudel. Likewise, we'd like to invite Dr. Chongbong Park, Director, Project Development, APT, and Joint Secretary. Dr. Chong Park joined the Secretariat of Asia Pacific Telecommunity on 1st July 2015 as a Director, Project Development. Dr. Park is responsible for management of all of work programs of APT, covering ICT policy, regulation, ICT development, and also technical groups, capacity building programs, as well as preparatory meetings for international conference and assemblies. His international engagement started in early 2000s through various joint projects with ITU and funding institutions such as African Development Bank and Inter-American Development Bank. He also had several various chairmanships of APT and ITU. His academic background is ICT technology management, and he holds a doctor degree on ICT standardization. I'd like to welcome Dr. Chongbong Park. Also would like to welcome Mr. C.K. Fung, Chief Regulatory Officer, Axiata Group. C.K. Fung is the Chief Regulatory Officer, Axiata Group, Berhad. C.K. has about 27 years of experience in telecommunication with roles in regulatory strategy and policy development, with prior experience in network engineering and project management. C.K. holds a BSc in Electrical and Electronic Engineering First Class from Queen's University, Belfast, UK, and an MBA and LLM, IT, and Telecoms Law from the University of Strathclyde. A huge round of applause, and welcome Mr. C.K. Fung. Thank you so much. As I said, the upcoming session, the session that we are having now, is called Emerging Mobile Technologies, where we are going to discuss more about 5G, way forward, and the best practices of 5G, as well as marketing up to 5G in developing countries and the prospect in Nepal. Let's see how the session goes. Over to the moderator, Mr. C. Mani Chaulagai.
Thank you very much, MC. Now we begin with the afternoon session. Afternoon session is always a bit tough after big lunch. I hope everyone will enjoy. Chairman of NTA, former chairman, board members, distinguished participant, distinguished panelist, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon and namaste. I'm very delighted to have this opportunity to moderate this very exciting session on emerging mobile technology in this special Spectrum conference conducted by NTA in this very special occasion of World Telecommunication and Information Society Day. 5G, I'll just set up a small context before we move on to the panel, the former panel discussion. 5G is a huge topic right now. It's creating buzz in the region as well as globally. This morning, our Honorable Minister also emphasized that sooner or later, Nepal has to go for 5G, and Nepal cannot be excluded from 5G deployment. In Nepal's context, with 4G already deployed in all 77 districts of Nepal, and talks of 6G are around the corner, with Indian ICT Minister declaring that India would be 6G ready by 2028-29. I strongly believe this is the right time for Nepal to be 5G ready. Time is now. From global standpoint, uptake of 5G is really getting traction across many markets. If we look at GSA data, some 519 operators in 156 countries have been investing in 5G, including in trial, acquisition of license, deployment, soft launches, and launches. And of those, 245 operators in about 95 countries are soft launching or launching 5G. Today, globally, we have over 1.3 billion 5G subscribers with year-on-year growth of 86%, which is quite huge. 5G has been deployed in many markets across various verticals. Globally, the use cases of 5G include enhanced mobile broadband services, ultra-reliable, low-latency communication services, massive machine-type communication services. What 5G has uniqueness, in terms of uniqueness, is 5G unique feature of high data rate, ultra-reliable transmission, and low latency makes it perfect solution to natively support emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and so on. And 5G has also been the key enabler of fourth industrial revolution, thanks to its unique feature of low latency and reliability. Now again, in the context of Nepal, the Digital Nepal initiative has been launched by Government of Nepal some time ago with the objective of maximizing ICT in all sectors, including agriculture, tourism, education, finance, and many other sectors in order to enhance productivity in production sector and efficiency in public service delivery. 5G can be an enabler and can be used as an engine to realize this envision of digital economy of Government of Nepal. So with this context in place, now I would like to invite distinguished panelists for today's session, this afternoon session, and we have 3 panelists today, and each of the panelists would be given 20 minutes of time, and after the end of your presentation, there would be some question from my side, and we'll open the floor for some time at the end of the session. So the first presentation would be from Dr. Jung Hwang Park, Director, Project Development APT, and he would be presenting on best practices of 5G deployment in the developing countries. The floor is yours now.
Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jongbong Park, Director of Project Development in the Asia Pacific Telecom Community. I'm looking after the APT work program. It's always challenging to make a presentation right after the decent lunch break. And then my voice is always make people dizzy and sleepy. But I will do my best. But it's good for me to make a presentation before two other esteemed speakers. It's a kind of good arrangement. Thank you for the moderator. So today I'm supposed to deliver the best practices in 5G deployment and focusing on the developing countries and then especially in the Asia Pacific region. Thank you. I'm not good at technology. Okay. Please bear with me to say a couple of words for introducing APT, my organization. I'll be brief. Asia Pacific Telecom Community is an intergovernmental organization established back in 1979. It's a joint initiative from the ITU and then UNESCO. And then our primary focus is on ICT development in the various form, like technical meetings, capacity building, and various forums, including Spectrum Management Symposium, AWG, and APG, and others. We also coordinate the regional view to prepare the international conferences. This year is a particularly important year to prepare the World Radio Conferences to be held in Dubai this year. We have a membership, 38 members, and then 4 associate members, and then we also have industry members, including Axiata and others. We are covering the connectivity, which we are now discussing, and then innovation, trust and safety, and then inclusion and the capacity building, and some other collaboration and partnership. So I don't wish to go in detail because it's just introduction of the APT, but APT, we have certain work program covering the spectrum issue. We have a series of APT symposium spectrum management, and then we also have APT web dialogue focusing on the spectrum management. And then we have an APT wireless group to discuss spectrum and the new emerging radio and wireless communication issues. And then we also APT preparatory group for preparing WRC. Yes, when it comes to 5G, our esteemed moderator already outlined why 5G is so important. So I'm supposed to deliver some messages, especially the best practices in the region. What are the best practices in deploying 5G in the developing countries? I wouldn't say best practices because it depends on the definition and that depends on the context. It can be a best practices, but it can be a worst practices in some cases. So I would refer as a reference cases for your consideration. And then I will sum up with the slide of consideration. Why 5G? Our moderator already outlined. It's a kind of a high throughput, a faster speeds and lower latency. And you understand it's not necessary to read out all of this. But one thing I wish to highlight at this juncture is that 5G itself is a tool for bridging the digital divide. As we can see, 5G might kind of a notion that deepen the digital divide. Some of the developed countries like Japan, Korea, Singapore, they are quite well advanced in 5G deployment, whereas some others, developing countries, are not ready to come up with 5G. But when it comes to 5G itself, it's the tool to bridge the digital divide. So I will make some examples, provide some examples afterwards. Regarding the 5G itself, as our moderator already mentioned, we have some data. Asia-Pacific region is the #1 region to deploy the 5G commercial services in the world. But when we look at the situation as of now, we are quite behind from other regions. I cannot memorize all the slides. Especially when you look at the data here, I'm not sure it's work, but when we look at the global sense, 239 lives, 5G networks in 85 economies. But when it comes to Asia-Pacific region, which has more than 50% of population, global population, but the data shows that only 46 live 5G networks in 19 economies. So we are really lag behind compared to other regions. What is the reason? I think we need to think about what is the reason, but I think it's quite obvious because of pandemic, because of the lack of investment, not so much conducive policy and regulatory arrangement. Industry and our member administrations are not ready to adopt 5G. Many cases we observe that 3G and 4G are the dominant technologies in these days. And then some of the Pacific countries, they cannot terminate 2G because they don't need any data. They just rely on voice at the moment. So there are some issue for digital literacy issues as well. I mentioned that at the previous slide, 5G would be a good tool for bridging the digital divide. This is the example, 5G fixed wireless access. I think you might be aware of the concept of the FWA. When it comes to, especially this country, Nepal, you have quite challenging terrains, lots of hilly and mountains, very difficult to deploy fixed optical fiber networks. But when it comes to 5G, you put the tower as a FWA, you can reach out more than, sometimes it depends on the design of the network, but it goes 5 kilometers or sometimes more than 25 kilometers to reach out the rural areas. So APT, we had a project with Nepal to provide a fixed fiber optic to the base camp of the Himalaya a couple of years back. But nowadays, because of 5G, we don't need to invest all the money to dig out the land and then deploy the networks. Only to the 5G FWA would be a quite efficient way to reach out the rural areas. So there are many cases. I just copied some of the examples, like Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and Vietnam. But the Philippines is quite interesting cases. Globe Telecom and then DICT is the ministry in the Philippines, looking after ICT areas, to provide the free internet connectivity to over 10,000 schools, public schools, by using the FWA. So they are primarily focusing on the rural areas by using FWA. There are many global cases aside from Asia-Pacific region. So I think this is really good for Nepal and other developing countries to consider. This morning, although I cannot understand Nepali, but I got the information from colleagues, the minister, Her Excellency, highlight the importance of the rural and remote area connectivity. We are talking about 5G, we are talking about 6G in coming years, but those are the connectivity issues to reach out all the villages and the remote and unserved and underserved area. So I think this 5G is a fundamental issue. FWA is a fundamental tool for you to consider. Regarding the second one would be the 5G spectrum roadmap. Actually, it's not the 5G roadmap, but it's a roadmap itself, because many countries adopt a technology-neutral approaches. But when they release out those spectrum, most of the case they are using 5G in those spectrum band. So this is just example. But what we can say is that the government, especially the NTA, the regulator who is looking after the spectrum, need to set out the transparent and the foreseeable roadmap to the industry where they can contribute. So the NTA should set up the national spectrum roadmap to invite investment from the operators. And then 5G, we are talking about the spectrum and then spectrum awarding. Those are some examples I think you might be aware of. Like Maldives, I would like to say Maldives and Bhutan are the similar case. As you know, Maldives is island country. It's very difficult to deploy network. So they give the spectrum almost free of charge, although they put some license fee, but it's quite minimum to encourage mobile operator to deploy the network investment in a proper way. And then Bhutan, I think Bhutan and Nepal would be the similar the context in terms of train. But Bhutan provides free of charge of the spectrum, although they have some minimum license fee. So I think it would be good to think about what is the proper mechanism giving the license and giving the spectrum, and then some government, obviously this is the major resource, the revenue for running the organization and then deploy the network by the government itself. So I think this is a quite important issue. So I think we need to think about what is the balance between those two. And then the Philippines also charge, their approach is a bit different from others. They charge for the megahertz, per megahertz, $200 per year. And then Indonesia, they provide a license for 20 years at $77 million. So it's quite long-term licensing duration, and then quite a reasonable price. And then I think those issues also discussed at the previous session, infrastructure sharing. Some of the cases, especially quite difficult to train, they need to think about the sharing the infrastructure and then sharing not only the ICT infrastructure, but also national infrastructure as well. So when it comes to India in 2020, Indian regulators proposed that sharing the radio access network, RAN, should be a mandatory for 5G services to improve network coverage and devices, reduce the cost. And then Malaysia is also took the similar concept, but it's a passive infrastructure sharing. This is a summing up slides. I have 2 slides more. When we think about the 5G, I think there are many elements, but I just capture only 4 points. The first one is a conducive policy and regulatory environment. Government should play the key role to have some transparent and foreseeable policy, invite members, especially the stakeholders in the industry, to contribute through the PPP and any other ways. And so the government should play the key role. And then also, at the same time, number 2 is, I already mentioned the reasonable price of the spectrum. At the same time, it is important to modernize the licensing mechanism. As I said this morning at the opening speech, APT has a SATRC work program, South Asia Telecommunications Regulatory Council. We already developed a modernizing telecommunication licensing mechanism through the APT report. So I'd like to invite all members to take a look what would be the modernizing licensing mechanism in SATRC context. And then my apology, there is a typo. It's a thorough plan, not the true plan. Because of the difficult terrain, we need to have some different approaches in the urban areas and the rural areas, especially the backhaul network. So we have seen the dependency is getting increased in terms of the fixed line, but some other cases in the rural area and the hilly mountainous area, we need to think about some alternative choices. Nowadays, LEO provides lots of options and a good point for consideration. So I think LEO would be the good alternative choices as well. And then always the application and then killer application, like use cases is also important. So in Nepali context, I think some of example can be invented, like tourism or healthcare and education and so on by using 5G technologies. This would be my last slide. This slide comes from MIH Japan when they make a presentation. I think this is quite useful diagram to make a positive circular. So please take a look. You can see the expansion of the 5G investment, make unique technologies, and they increase the compatible devices and so on and so forth. So when all the stakeholders join together, have a collective efforts, I think eventually 5G ecosystem will grow. And then there are 2 more slides, but this is just for information. APT has collected all the information from our member administration in terms of the spectrum assignment. But when I look at the situation in Nepal, it was done in March 2021. So I think we need some collaboration to update this data. I think, but this information still provide the overall structure of which spectrum band is being used for which services and technologies. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
right on time. Thank you, Dr. Park, for sharing best practices on 5G use cases in APAC for us. And thank you for your recommendation for Nepal market as well. So next presenter is Mr. CK Fong. Please proceed. Your time is 20 minutes.
Thank you, moderator. Namaste, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank, yeah, this one, right? Okay, that one, all right. Apologies, technical, okay, next, all right, thank you. Okay, let me start again. So, namaste, good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank Excellency Chairman NTA and esteemed board members of the NTA for inviting Axiata and myself to be here to share a few ideas and knowledge exchange. I think this is a very good initiative, and I congratulate Nepal and NTA for this event commemorating the World ICT Day. So, I'd like to begin with a few, with an outline of the presentation today, just to cover about 5G as a digital economy enabler. I think some of the messages you have heard already this afternoon. Probably I will skip past this section quite quickly. I will go into 5G capabilities because it's also important to know what 5G can do and cannot do. A lot of the news media out there about 5G, sometimes we have to be a bit careful and circumspect because a lot of the technology is actually hype. So we need to be careful what we say about 5G capabilities, especially its use in emerging markets like Nepal. Right? And because Axiata is operating in 11 markets, and a lot of our companies operate in similar demographics and customers just like Nepal. So we know roughly how the consumers will behave. Yeah? Number three, I will do a quick sidestep to talk about in network investment economics because it's important for you to understand from a mobile network operator perspective, what are the key factors in consideration in terms of making 5G sustainable as a business and making sure that you have enough money to turn around the investment cycle. Because it's not about just putting one lump sum in the beginning. You've got to continue to invest again and again, year after year, for 10 years, 15 years. So how do you make that economic model work? I'll give you some examples there. And lastly, of course, allow me to respectfully to propose a few ideas for 5G policy readiness. Okay, I'll begin with this chart of what we call economic multipliers. I think you can see that there are some very smart people have done some calculations to show that there is a positive economic multiplier for every increase in broadband penetration. I think you heard this before. So whenever a country or a market increases adoption of broadband usage, there's a positive correlation with that number to the GDP, right? Contrast to some sectors like, for example, tobacco, gambling, where each time you had an increase in adoption, there is perhaps a negative economic multiplier because governments need to build hospitals and clinics to cure people of addiction and stuff like that. So I think we're all in a good industry because every day we come to the office, we know we are creating value, not just for the public and so for the consumers, because not just to get you to use the broadband, but because of their usage of broadband, a lot of other sectors get impacted. Right? This is what we call the positive economic multiplier. And when we go to the 5G era, this also affects, this economic multiplier effect also increases. In fact, this multiplier not just covers consumers, which is the man on the street, but also businesses and industries and what we call verticals. Because 5G, when the designers and specification people designed it many years ago, they designed it, one of the main aspects of benefit for 5G is for its use in industries. For example, in manufacturing, in automotive, in healthcare and agriculture. You heard of IoT, you heard of how smart cities can be built and using 5G as connectivity backbone. This is where 5G is really is best. Back home in Malaysia, I have 2 5G devices, right? I have 5G at home. But when I go using my smartphone for Instagramming or doing work or searching for stuff or doing email, sometimes the benefit of 5G versus 4G is not very apparent. So I said, okay, I'm on 5G network, there's no difference now because I'm not using my smartphone for metaverse, not yet. I'm not using my smartphone for high-speed gaming. Because if you are a gamer in this room or you have children who are gamers, latency is very important because if you don't get latency, you get shot, right? But that is not happening on the smartphone. It's happening in the home, right? So for the man on the street, the mass consumer, 5G benefit perception is not so much, right? Not so great. There's some addition, but not so great. Where the increase is in industries, in verticals. And this is where I want to show you a few examples of what we are doing at Axiata to encourage this sort of adoption. All right. I think the speaker from World Bank this morning talked about the supply demand. So this is a typical supply demand chart, where in terms of introducing any new services, there's always a supply side factor and a demand side factor. So in order to make the 5G business case work for not just for mobile operators and investors, but also for the country, everybody needs to talk about these 2 factors. For example, the demand side. How many Nepalis are really willing to pay an extra money per month for 5G benefit? Are the smartphones which are 5G ready? Now they're quite expensive. Is it affordable for general? Maybe some of the rich ones can get 5G, can afford a 5G handset. But for the mass consumers, maybe not yet. Maybe in the future, yes, but not now. Enterprise, we talk about factories and manufacturing plants, smart city councils, right? All this fancy stuff. Are they willing to upgrade their factories and put in automation, to put in digitization, to put in computerization? Because before you have 5G to benefit that, you need to have all these factories upgraded, right? So you have smart factories, you have robots on the floor. Who's going to pay for the robots first before you make the robots smart, right, on 5G? So the appetite for investment by the industries is also very important. That's why you see in some cases, especially in emerging countries, where the 5G business case, the use case is actually still experimental. Yes, you see it in the West. Some of the Western countries are now deploying 5G services in factories and ports, for example, or in highways. But that's because already their industrial base is very high. They already have robots on the factory floor. So it's a matter of upgrading that a little bit, put in a 5G access point. But for many of the emerging markets, the manufacturing plants, the factories are not there yet, right? So you don't see such stories in Malaysia, for example, where I come from, or Indonesia, where 5G is already there, because the manufacturing sector is not ready to invest. So it will come in time, but we don't need to rush it too fast, because otherwise you will be too fast. Right? So that's the demand side. On the supply side, there are factors which we need to consider, and we talk about, because this is a spectrum management workshop, I think it's good to talk about spectrum. I think Dr. Park just now talked about getting the spectrum bands ready. That's very important. There's also things like high sector taxation, regulatory fees, and in emerging markets like Nepal, and also in where Axiata operates in Bangladesh and in Sri Lanka, the ARPUs, which is the average revenue per user, is really low. So for example, I go around telling people, for every GB we sell in these emerging markets, my equivalent in Europe can sell it for 5 times more expensive. And if you go to the Americas, the same 1 GB is 10 times expensive. So in one way, it's good for the consumers in emerging markets because it's cheap, affordable. Connectivity is affordable. But for the business case, it's a stretch, it's a challenge, because there's less money to go around and be invested. Right? And this is talking about deteriorating network economics, which I'll talk about later. The last point is about inconsistent regulations, and this is where I would respectfully ask the people here in the room to consider this in a short while. Okay, let me go into 5G capabilities. You've seen this famous 5G pyramid, so I will not go to it in detail. I'll talk about verticals and industries. So in this slide, this is some of the areas of sectors that in the West where 5G is quite prevalent. This is where the industries and sectors are putting money in 5G. For example, in retail logistics, in transportation, in oil and gas, in smart ports. So these are very, very niche sectors in the general economy where 5G is playing a positive role, and there's growth, right? When there's growth, that means there's demand. When there's demand, supply will match it. So that's why the economic flywheel actually takes place. So 5G is not for every part of society. It's not for all parts of the economy, right? But in certain areas where there is some, people see there's a need, and then, of course, the investment is there. Okay, so at Axiata, of course, we've been preparing this for a few years now, and we zoom into 5 different verticals, we call it verticals, where we think 5G can actually play an important value add. For example, in ports, airports, smart cities, manufacturing, and oil and gas. So this is where over the last 2 years, we have not just invested in the knowledge and capacity to do 5G. More important in 5G is to build a partnership ecosystem. And unlike 4G and 3G, some of my colleagues like myself will tell you, building mobile broadband networks in 3G and 4G is quite simple. You design a network, you secure the LAN, you build a tower, you put your radios, you fine-tune it, optimize, and you monitor. You have 4G, voila, start making money. But in 5G, that is the baseline, but that is not enough. You need partners to go into the factories, to the cities, the airport owners, to build a solution on top of that connectivity layer. It's not just connectivity, it's the layer. Because if you go in just with connectivity, they go away, I don't know how to talk to you. So where we go in, and we build expertise for the last 2 years, connectivity, ICT solutions, things like AI, machine learning, solutioning, devices, etc. So the whole pyramid, the whole stack is actually offered as a one-stop solution to people in the verticals. And that actually force us to change our way of doing business. Because when we are no longer able to go to market just by ourselves. And this ability to draw partners is important. Because if you are nobody, if you're an MNO who is nobody, none of the IT giants who have this capability will partner with you, right? Because who are you? So this is where, over the last few years, we have tried to build the ecosystem, leveraging on the Axiata business case. Because Axiata is in 11 countries in this region, we find that we are able to attract a lot of partners from the different places. And you can see on the right-hand side, bottom, all these partners who are able to join with us on partnerships to build a solution base to offer 5G services and innovation. So for example, these are some of the names we see. I'll give you an example where we have, we need to change the battery on this. Okay, so for example, this is one example where we built capabilities for the oil and gas. Petronas is the largest oil and gas company in Malaysia. DHL is logistics, you're familiar with them. CICT is port. So for these 3 verticals, we have this example, we are partnered with drone manufacturers and security system suppliers in the middle to build the components layers, right? It's not just the connectivity, it's about the stack above it. And on top around it, we're using our own internal capabilities in a company we call Axiata Digital Labs. We have set up a company internally called ADL, Axiata Digital Labs, which has expertise in software, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. So with that kind of software glue, hardware partnerships, we can now go to the customer and say, here's a solution for you. Please take it and see. Yeah? Now, this type of ecosystem partnerships is very important in 5G, and it's a new model, right? So for MNOs who don't have that capabilities, you are starting from a very difficult position. Okay, let me swing gears to economics. So this is a chart, sorry, it's a bit busy, let me try to explain it. This is a chart from GSMA. And this is a chart mapping out the different cost elements. You see in the bubbles, big bubbles means big costs. The biggest bubble there is you can see, is rent infrastructure. And energy is a big bubble. So the bubbles represent the costs in a 5G network, incremental costs. From a 4G network to do a 5G network, you have extra costs. What are these costs? These costs are represented in the bubbles, right? Some are big, some are small. Some are surprisingly a big cost. For example, energy. So you never thought about it, that energy has become as expensive cost item as the network equipment. And it's true in the 5G world. So we have to prepare for that, right? The vertical and horizontal scales is talking about the degree of difficulty. For example, the bottom one on the horizontal is talking about cost delta. So it means the more right side you go, the bigger the gap between 4G and 5G world. That means from a mobile operator perspective, rolling out 4G networks, it is more expensive as a surprise cost, energy cost, compared to, for example, core infrastructure, for example, who's a bit on the left-hand side. So these are things we have to look out for. On the vertical, it's about complexity and it's about skill sets, how we need to upgrade our own internal resources to build and design and operate 4G networks, to build, operate, and design 5G networks and services. So you see, of course, the scale goes up in the core network side of the business. So these are some of it. It's a very simplified illustration to show that actually doing 5G is not as simple as just flicking a switch, right? It is a lot more complex. It is a lot more cost. And this translates into what we call the market structure, because ultimately what happens, what happens is that you see a lot of...
Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Sure. There's a lot of consolidation in the industry. You will have seen reports in the media in the West where mobile operators are consolidating, means they are being merged into smaller groups. Even in Asia Pacific, in where we are. Last year, Axiata Group finalized a merger of the biggest merger we ever had, because the economics, the business case of doing a mobile operations is shifting rapidly. Even today, as we speak, there's another exercise in Sri Lanka. So you see across the world, the number of mobile operators will shrink. And the days where in the 3G world, where you have more means better, more means good, right? It's not the case anymore. Because as markets saturate, when you reach 100% penetration adoption, the growth for mobile, for revenue, and for profit becomes very challenging. It's not just in Nepal, it's not just in Asia Pacific, it's across the world. So ultimately, what we call the optimal market structure, the ideal number of MNOs per market will fall to 2 to 3. If you look, and it's independent of the size of the population. For example, China, 1.2 billion citizens, only 3 national MNOs, so big. Singapore, 4, so small. So it doesn't matter the size of the population, it's the competitive dynamics that actually shape the number of players in a market, which is survivable and which is sustainable. Right. So as 5G matures and becomes dominant, this consolidation will become even more pronounced. Right. So next slide, please, last slide. Let me offer a couple of policy suggestions, because we're talking about supply side factors as well. Spectrum is talked about quite often today. I want to talk also about in the situation in Nepal where you have a loss of idle spectrum. That means spectrum in the existing bands, 900, 1800, 2.1, which are not used at all. So we know there are certain rules that's in place that were designed for certain policy outcomes. May I respectfully request that these rules be revised? I specifically mentioned it as spectrum caps, because you have lots of spectrum which is not used at all. And every block that is not put in market to be used by the consumers is an economic wastage, right? And I think Nepal as a country cannot afford this to happen. So perhaps my plea to you is to review the caps. You still can have caps, but relax it a little bit, but allow it to be redeployed by us, by NCell, by NTC, or whoever wants to do it, right? And put that spectrum into economic use, because we can't afford to have not it be used at all. Secondly, we talk about next bands. So today, this year, 2023, is the year of WRC. Some of you will know it. One of the biggest issues of today is identifying new bands for IMT 2020 and beyond. And this is where Nepal as a country, as many other countries, you need to prepare ahead and designate the right band for this year. I want to talk about one thing on the other side, which is the non-spectrum regulatory gaps. We talk about, Dr. Park talked about regulatory certainty. And as an operator, I think we really appreciate if the authorities can guarantee that when we do a regulation, it lasts for 5 years. Longer than that, there's no change. There's no abrupt changes in policy. Because any abrupt changes in policy, especially if it's done in a non-transparent manner, creates a lot of fear. So, I mean, it's logical, right? If you go around driving the car in the streets of Kathmandu, you know the rules of the traffic rules are such and such. You are confident that nothing will change. But suddenly, if the government changes the traffic rules and without telling you or giving you enough notice, suddenly you are afraid of driving fast or driving carefully, because then it becomes dangerous and risky. So the same analogy can apply to mobile operators. We need certainty in policy making, longer the better. Help us by consulting with us so that we can at least give you some inputs. Me, myself, and Exeter, my colleague, we have visibility over 11 markets. So we know what happens in Sri Lanka, we know what happens in Bangladesh, and these are quite similar markets to you. The consumers in Bangladeshi consumers is quite the same as a Nepali consumer. The way they use the phone for Instagram, TikTok is quite similar, right? So we know what works and what doesn't work. So allow us to help you to understand what is the right things, so that when you don't make the same mistakes as they do, right? That's the request. Lastly, just want to talk about regulatory asymmetry. Sorry, just 1 minute, I'll be done. Regulatory asymmetry is important because, as one of the speakers this morning said, Nepal is quite unique because you have a high penetration of fixed broadband subscribers, which is very good. That is a very good outcome, because and some of the service providers are here, and you've done a good job because it is it's everywhere, right? The problem with that kind of model is that there is what we call a regulatory asymmetry, a regulatory mismatch, because at the end of the day, the consumer on the street, when he uses the broadband, right, whether it's fixed broadband or mobile broadband, to him it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of whether it's outside the house or inside the house, right, where he switches the phone from a 4G signal to a Wi-Fi signal. So from the consumer perspective, he's buying the same product. He's doing it for the same reason, to go on TikTok, to check his email, to talk to his girlfriend. So it means that when these are same services, the same rules should apply to whoever provides that service, regardless of technology. So this is where I say some of the licensing rules, the fees, plus the obligations on consumer protection should be at least made equivalent, at least you have a pathway to make it equivalent. Because then then we have a full and functioning competitive market where everybody's on the same playing field, competing to innovate and to get the customer on equal terms. Okay. So that's one of the few things I wish to respectfully put before you. Happy to discuss this further in meetings and of course in the Q&A. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next presenter is Dr. Pradeep Paudel, Deputy Director, NTA, and he would be presenting on 5G and way forward in Nepal.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, experts, and all the participants. It's me, Pradeep Paudel. I'm going to discuss about the 5G and way forward in our context, in the context of Nepal. Actually, my previous, our moderator and our previous experts, they make my life easy because most of the content has already been covered. That's why I'll focus only the content that has not been covered or partially covered. Let's start. Today, these are the agenda for today's presentation. First, I'll discuss a little bit about 4G, then 5G, and mainly my presentation will be focused on opportunities, challenges, and the possible way forward. I think this way forward could be equally applicable for other developing countries and LDCs as well. Let's start with 5G. This is just the evolution, just what we, all of us are most well known about the technology, but I'm not going to differentiate between the technology, among the technology. Just I want to mention that 5G is quite different than the previous generation. Actually, the previous generation was focused to enhance the mobile broadband data rate. It's beyond that. If we talk in our context, if we talk about the subscription, we have considered the 3G and beyond technology as a broadband. That's why it's 93. And if we talk about 4G, still we have only 65%. And if we go through that map, still we can notice that we have to work very hard to provide the coverage throughout the nation. I'll go very fast in this slide because most of the content is already being covered. Indeed, the 5G, it is a new kind of network designed to connect everything. And actually, it is expected to connect the people, it will change the paradigm from connecting people to the connecting society. And it has been considered as a disruptive innovations, and that significantly alter or affect the way of industry functions. And together with other technologies, such as IoT, digital twin, artificial intelligence, the 5G could play a pivotal role for Industry 4.0 and 5.0 as well. And it has been considered as a driver for digital transformation and ultimately for the social economic development of the nation. And also it will deliver the social values that is most important and across the key area of SDGs targets. And it will help to improve the quality of life. This is the well-known figure. I'm going to skip it because all of us, we are looking at this figure since last, I think, 7 years. And if we talk about the benefits of the technology, the 5G, it provides the benefits for all service providers, industry partners, and vendors. And that's quite crazy because it's quite different than previous one with industry partners. Actually, this could be the vertical sectors. Other vertical sectors, it has already been covered by previous presenters. That's why I'm not going to detail. Just what I want to highlight is 5G is expected to overtake 4G and becoming our dominant technology by the end of this decade. This is from GSMA intelligence report. And similarly, what we can notice is the adaptation rate. Adaptation rate is quite crazy because Many people are still asking about the uses, possible uses, but the rate of adaptation, if we compare to 4G, it's quite interesting. It always make me crazy, think, and similarly, 5G, there was a sample study that has been done by Ericsson. In the report, it has been mentioned that 5G users are moving more demanding, and they are not going back to 4G. That's also interesting figure that I think that could be interesting for us. If we talk about the opportunity, actually most of the content is already been covered by the previous speakers, though I want to just highlight that. The reliable, versatile, and secure and high-speed broadband service, demand of this service is always increasing, and actually the rate of increase, the demand has been increased after this pandemic. Actually, we call it as a new normal situation. As mentioned before, it could be a good enabler to bridge the digital divide that we have, especially to provide the rural connectivity using FWA applications. It has already been covered. And what I want to mention is, it could be a good means for digital transformation because it provides diverse use cases in vertical sectors. And it could be a host for other technologies such as blockchain and AI and so on. And also machine learning, and if we talk about the buzzword, that's big data analytics. That's why it could be a host for those emerging technologies. And it is also expected that it will unlock the economic opportunities via competitiveness and innovation. That's most important. I think we realities should also focus on to develop or keep our competitiveness and also focus on innovations. Similarly, it will provide the significant economic contributions. Different studies shows different figures, and also the figures could be different. But in the conclusion, what we can say is its contributions will be significant by 2030. That is sure. The figure could be different because different studies shows different figures. And similarly, it is expected that it will also create the new opportunities for new job as well. Let's talk a little bit more challenges about 5G focusing in LDCs. Yes, mobile operators, revenue, ROI, ARPU, everything is declining continuously since last few years. And revenue per megahertz of spectrum, if we calculate, that is also decreasing, whereas the spectrum pricing is not declining accordingly. That's also we have to consider. And also we have to consider the existing obligations. Yes, we are all aware about the renewal fee, spectrum fee, and other fees that operators need to pay for the government and the regulators. And similarly, the study that shows that the current telecommunication market has become increasingly saturated. That research shows that. That means we have to find other way of doing business. Operator has to think out of the box. Traditional approach may not work in this context. The revenue growth is expected to be flat, not only for this year, for coming couple of years. It is the estimation by GSMA. That way, the operators should be ready for that as well. Similarly, meanwhile, if we talk about the 4G utilization, not only in our context, if you go through our neighbors like Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, the currency is currently it's too low, and it's still by 2025 still they are not crossing 85 or something else. That we have to be aware of that. That means the operators they have to exploit the untapped market for 4G. They have to focus on it, and also they could maximize their ROI since they are already deployed deployed few networks. Similarly, the 4G rollout, complete 4G rollout is still not complete, not only in Nepal, but also in others. Similarly, if we talk about the cost for the investment for 4G and 5G and so on, the universal broadband, cost of universal broadband for all developing countries over next decades ranges from 0.6 to trillion for 4G. Look the figures. If we go for 5G, even this is NSA, it will be 1.1. And if we think it is YSA, it will ever increasing. This figure shows that obviously it is cost extensive or expensive products, not so easy to invest. And if we think about the ROI perspectives, it's always challenging, and for the investor, it's always challenging, and we regulators are aware of that. Investment requirement for 5G, it's about if we go for SA, another study shows that the 5G is about 3 times higher than 4G. And if we consider the rural area, like in Nepal, it will even more higher. That's we have to take into account. Also, we have to consider the other infrastructure, readiness of the other infrastructures. Well, what we can notice is, from the study shows that more than 80% of falls in rural areas, rural sites by the power outage. That means there are other challenges that operators need to tackle. And similarly, there is high fee and charges to assess the street furniture as well. And 5G, also there is another problem or challenge is the 5G device ecosystem and the cost of the device itself, considering our economy and the purchasing power of our consumer. Similarly, there is a poor coordination with vertical industry, not only in Nepal. This is common for all the LDCs, and there is lack of flexible policies. Require extensive network piloting. It requires extensive network piloting to test use cases and stimulate the market engagement. But the regulators and government are not so flexible, including in Nepal. Security and trust. Actually, this becomes the more challenging after the development of new technologies such as cloud computing, edge computing, private network, and the network slicing. These technologies provide the benefits also provide the new opportunity, new threats from the security and trust perspective. Yes, as I mentioned in the previous figures, there are diverse beneficiaries, and there is lack of sustainable business model. Now, the demand is not quite clear for the operators. That's why it's so challenging for the operators. Now the question, who will invest? That's a big question everywhere around the world. Who will invest? The government could be one who has sufficient capital left, but how government invest? The way of investment could be different. I think we have to think from the different way, and we are thinking in that way. We have to, how we can invest. For example, could we relieving other obligations, for example, license fee or frequency fee or something else. We have to think in that way. If we think about the previous, sometimes people talk about yes, technology is always not the push, that's always not the demand side created, it's push approach. But it's not clear in the context of 5G. The most interesting thing of 5G I have not mentioned here is the acceptance. There are some studies, they did the acceptance test of the 5G technology. The result was very fantastic, and 5G is well accepted. The research shows that like that. Now, yes, there are problems. Now, how to solve those problems? As being regulators, we are thinking, and we are working for as of now, we should go for a balanced approach. Yes, 4G will remain dominant over next 10 or 15 years. It depends. And also, the 5G, the distributed innovations, and it will expected to change the future technology landscape, and also it impacts the economy and requires the new, and also we need the new policy approaches to capitalize the benefits. Yes, we need to have a balanced approach. What could be the balanced approach? That is the question for now. For Nepal as well. Our approach could be, let's focus on 4G deployment, full-fledged 4G deployments. Let's give the experience of full-fledged 4G to the customer. Then they will start to engage with the high-speed broadband. Then you will feel, your operators will also feel the demand of other or even higher bandwidth. Then we have to start. We cannot stop in 4G. Also, we can start with 5G use cases from the cities. Actually, 4G could be an investment option for the short-term ROI. I think every operators, they will be agree on that. And the 5G could be a better option for urban areas and long-term. Let's take like this approach. Let's go with this approach. I think this could work even for Nepal as well. And also, we have to promote the digital transformation and innovations. Actually, it costs high upfront capital expenditures and increase if the deployment accelerated. That is the most important thing that we have to notice about the 5G. If we accelerate the deployment of the 5G, the cost will increasing exponentially. The research shows that, like that. The result shows that. That's why it could be a better options, be a fast learner rather than early mover. That's why our approach could be the balanced approach. Moreover, I think we have to start to working with 5G strategy and digital innovation policies to provide the enabling environment and to provide the proper environment for digital innovation as well. And we start to work with collaboration with other vertical sectors and regulators. Today we had a presentation of Rashtra Bank. I think this is the starting point of collaboration. Also, we have to focus on infrastructure development and management, because infrastructure sharing and those stuffs need to be done. Also, we have to ensure the security and trust, since we are working on cyber security bill. And also, we have to provide the incentives for the operator to invest. That's most important for us. And also, we have to provide the favorable spectrum allocations and competition policy. I think this is the gist or crux of this conference. How much time do I have?
You still have 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the spectrum management context in our situation, in our scenario. And these are the frequency bands. I think it's quite small. Anyway, these are the bands that has been considered for 5G and beyond technology. In Nepal, we have adopted the technology neutrality band. The operators who wish to launch whatever technology they want in any frequency bands. That's the things. If we focused on 5G, we need the license and unlicensed, both bands, for the development of the sectors from 5G and IoT and others. If we talk about the license band, in sub-1 gigahertz band, and we are quite lucky because we have 700 band, and that is getting popular in the community. And we have 75 megahertz spectrum available. I think this could be very interesting for us to cover our rural areas and to bridge the digital divide. Similarly, and we are in very good position because we have the sufficient bandwidth, around 300 megahertz of bandwidth available in 1 to 3 gigahertz range, frequency range. That means we are in very favorable positions. If someone or operators want, we can give whatever they wish. That is the things that I think that could be the interesting message for operators who want to invest in Nepal. Similarly, also we have C-band. That is one of the most crucial bands for the 5G deployment. And we have enough and sufficient spectrum available in this band as well. Yes, we have to do some coordination with the fixed satellite services, but still we can manage few hundreds of megahertz band here as well. And also, we have considered the 26 gigahertz band for millimeter wave, but the applications is not developed around the world so much. That's why I think it's too early to decide about the millimeter wave. I think we have sufficient band in sub 1 gig, 1 to 3 gig, and C band. And recently, what we are doing, now that could be the question for you, what the regulator is doing. Yes, we are doing, and we are working to create the favorable environment for operators. All the bands will be technology neutral. That means there will that's operator's choice, which service they want to launch or they want to provide to our to our people. And also, we do the frequency refarming on very frequent as for necessary to provide the continuous spectrum. And also, we are preparing auctions in 700 megahertz and 26 and 33 megahertz as well for new intent. But this point, I have started to keep it since last year because some policy level decisions need to be done for this, for the auctions. That's why we are waiting for that decision. And similarly, in above 23 megahertz band, all frequency bands will be in TDD and will be assigned at least 60 megahertz. I hope this 60 megahertz in this mid band, it could be a sufficient and handy bandwidth for operators as well. And also, we are working to release more unlicensed frequency band that could be very interesting for the people who are working on IoT and other machine-to-machine type communication services. And also, recently, the spectrum strategy already been approved. Yes, the roadmap, draft roadmap was ready since couple of years, but we are still waiting the spectrum policy. Once that policy gets approved, the roadmap will be float or will be approved and will be publicly available. That means all the documents is ready, strategy approved, policy draft roadmap and spectrum policy is already ready. And regarding the preparedness for 5G, yes, we are heavily working on it for the infrastructure development. Actually, that is most important for the backbone. National infrastructure is also needed because 5G creates a lot of data, and that data should travel. For that, we need the sustainable backbone. And we are working to develop that backbone. And also, we have started to collaboration with universities for soft skill development because, as I mentioned before, after the digital transformations, we have to do the innovations. After the innovations, we could have something, and that could lead to, or we have to bridge at least the innovation gap between the developed and developing countries. For that, we have to work, and that's why we have already been started to collaborate with universities for soft skill development. I hope that will help us for innovations. And similarly, from the policy level, there is Digital Nepal framework. I think it's quite old. I think it's, the success should be reassessed, and if necessary, it could be amended or it should be more actionable, I hope. At least I should say something like that. And also, we are revising ICT-related policies, and also we are working in telecommunications policy, Telecommunication Act and Cyber Security Act. And also, we have started to collaborate with other regulators. And we are also, meanwhile, we are also exploring some possible use cases, so that we can say that, look, operators, we have this could be the possible use cases. You could make business from those cases, so that we are studying on that. And also, we have given the 5G trial approval for ENT with 60 megahertz bandwidth in 26 megahertz band, and it will not have, and it's free. And given the condition that service also need to be free for the customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep ji, for the excellent presentation covering 5G deployment approaches in Nepal, spectrum, policy initiative, and 5G trial. Now, with all that, we'll move on to the interactive session. So there will be a couple of questions from my side to the panelists, and then we'll open the floor at the end. So the first question would be to Dr. Park from APT. In your presentation, you have mentioned about uptake of 5G in the APAC region. And operators in the APAC regions, some of the operators are already deploying 5G in high band, some in the low band. However, in the context of Nepal, operators are still in dilemma on whether the 5G should be deployed on immediate basis or they should wait for a while. Because the current LTE network, 4G LTE networks are not exploited to the fullest. So they are in a dilemma whether there are use cases for 5G. So in this context, what would be your suggestions for the service provider in Nepal?
Thank you, moderator. This is the excellent question to me. I think it's quite, yeah, I understand some dilemma, and then I observed the similar dilemma in other parts of the world because of their own constraints. But when I look at the Nepali situation, as Dr. Pradi already mentioned, they are now thinking of two trial bands, 600 megahertz band and then 26 gigahertz band. So when it comes to Kathmandu and then those urban area, I think 26 gigahertz band would be a good option to deploy. But when it comes to the rural areas, 600 megahertz band or 700 megahertz band or C band is a low band would be a good option because of the nature of the spectrum. So it might go far to reach out unserved and underserved area. But actually, the FWA also is a bit mixture between the two band, but it depends on the design. I think the high 26 gigahertz band or 23 gigahertz band could be an option in the FWA as well. So I think primary, I would suggest two lower band, 600 or 700 megahertz band in the rural area, and then upper band in the downtown areas. But in mixture of those two bands in the FWA services, I think we can extend the connectivity in the rural areas as well.
Yes, agreed with low band and mid band. However, for the 26 gigahertz band, we are not very sure if there is a use case for Nepal, because this is more for dense population like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Bangkok. But we have noted your suggestion. Thank you. So the next question is to CK Fong. It's a very big question because 17 million customers of Ncell Axiata in Nepal are anxiously waiting what you are going to do about 5G. Whether you are going to launch 5G and do the digital justice to your 17 million customer by providing enriched digital content, high data rate, enhanced mobile broadband services, or you will simply buy time. Because in your presentation, you have mentioned that current underutilized spectrum band should be released to maximize network efficiency. What this means is you are asking for more spectrum in 1800 and 1900 megahertz band, which you already have to the extent of international standard, right? So we would like you to be very blunt and give us answer on what is your plan for 5G deployment in Nepal and what would be the use cases. Thank you.
Okay, well, fantastic question. I think the figures answered for themselves. Dr. Pradeep's slide says 4G population coverage is 65%. 65% for a country is still quite low, right? This morning, the Honorable Minister said, please improve 4G coverage. This is instruction to us. So when we hear that kind of exhortation, okay, yeah, we agree, right? We need to improve our 4G. There's still a lot of Nepalese who are not living within the 4G umbrella. We need to take care of them as well, because when you talk about digital inclusion and digital divide, we need to solve the digital divide in 4G first, before we solve the digital divide in 5G, right? So that is where our appeal is. Because there is some spectrum in the existing GSM bands, 900, 1800, 2.1, which are not used. They have not been used for quite some years. And the longer you leave it unassigned, it becomes an economic dead weight, we call it. Right? So you use a lot of economic efficiencies. Allow us to use those blocks and extend the 4G all the way up to what the minister wants. Then, at the same time, we look at the market for 5G. Because 5G, is, as I said, is not all 17 million Ncell subscribers for tomorrow will switch on 5G, right? It's nice that if they can do it, but in practical realities, if tomorrow we launch 5G tomorrow, Not all 17 million ancestors will switch to a 5G phone, buy an upgrade, change the SIM card, and switch on 5G. It's not going to happen. It will happen. In time, it will happen to get all the way there, but it's not overnight. Right? That's what I say. So solve the 4G conundrum because that is the most pressing issue of today. Right? We need to get more Nepalis onto the broadband because of the economic multiplier effect, as I mentioned. To do that effectively, both the MNOs need more spectrum at the current bands. Right? That means some of the rules that we designed years ago on the caps, perhaps they could be relaxed a little bit. Please consider that because things have changed, circumstances have changed. It's not that we're wrong in the first place, but the environment has changed. So we need to refresh, right? Then at the same time, for 5G, when NSA's preparing, and this is because we need to align with them, and they prepare the 5G ecosystem. It's not just about changing the radio and you have 5G, right? It's not just that. It's about getting the verticals ready, the factories ready, have a test case, the airports. Are the airports ready to adopt 5G? Then you have a very good use case to publicize to all the world. Kathmandu Tribhuvan Airport, 5G ready, digital twin, right? But are they ready to invest? If they're ready, then we are ready, right? Of course, to get there, we also like to have some spectrum for 5G trials. This is a long-standing request. So please allow us to have some in the other bands so we can test the technology. Because sometimes the technology may need a bit tweaking here and there, right? So allow us to have some to test, just like you're given to our competitor. Then let's experiment, right? Then we build it stage by stage. Address the key issues, 4G is still needed. Then we go on to all these verticals, prepare the ground, prepare the verticals, so that we do it right. It's a big bang and Nepal gets the glory. Sorry, it was a long answer to your question.
Yes, but there were too many buts and if, and lots of contingency. Contingent factor, you mentioned lots of contingent factor, if that, then. Do you have a plan to roll out 5G in Nepal? If then, by when?
I think the short answer is yes, in 1 or 2 years' time. If I'm not, Adil is sitting there, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 or 2 years' time, we'll be ready. Or do Adil answer the question, Adil, since you're there?
Thank you so much, Mani. Thank you, CK. I think fundamentals of 5G, and I'm going to cover in my presentation, is all about what is the readiness of the market. I mean, when we looked at the data statistics, 50% of the people are using it for video streaming. I mean, with video streaming as being the primary source of driving data, needs, and with the DU staying at 4 GB per subscriber per month, we're not ready for 5G as a country. Fundamentally, when we talked about ecosystem, what ecosystem we have developed so far in the country? So I think when it comes to the readiness, yes, we are. But when you look at it, 7% of handset penetration, minimum 5G handset required $250, where the affordability of the people is hampered because we are talking about less than $1,000 per annum GDP capita per PPP. It's a little bit of buzzword that we talked about that let's launch 5G tomorrow. In terms of readiness, Ncell was always ready. And as we talked about getting trial, and I think my colleague CK has covered that we have done these trials. In fact, we have launched in certain countries and we have expertise to do a lot of use cases. But it's an irony that we have requested this 1 year ago, but we haven't got anything. So before talking about when we're going to launch 5G, my question would be that when we're going to get trial license for us to start with. So it's hand in hand, it's a development of industry, it's user maturity, it's about adoption of the markets and affordability together with the readiness and willingness from the operator side. So answering your question, Mr. Mani, Ncell, as ever, is always ready. And we wish to participate in this at the appropriate time. The time frame looking at it with what we are seeing, it might be wrong. It's 1.5 years from now. But looking at this, we have to also start the trials first. And actually, we are requesting humbly basically to get the equal opportunities to drive this together for the digital Nepal. Thank you so much.
That is, I'm sorry to tell you that is a little bit pessimistic answer, because in order to be a market leader, you are one of the market leaders in the country, and you need to be more proactive. And I realize that you have been deploying 5G in similar nature of markets like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, right?
No. Yeah, we have no 5G in South Asia yet. Not
Okay.
in Bangladesh, not in Sri Lanka.
But,
it's trial in Sri Lanka.
But if you want to remain as a market leader, I think the best way would be, as Pradeep ji has suggested in his presentation, and Dr. Park has also mentioned, maybe it is better to start with 5G deployment from some densely populated cities like Kathmandu, Pokhara, and Viratnagar. Because I would like to tell you one thing, that Nepalese customers that you have, they are very vibrant customers because they are youth, and you have seen them changing in recent political election here in Nepal, who they voted for. They voted for change, okay? So if you don't want to go for change, and if they have other options, you will have serious problem. I'm sorry to be blunt. So I'm telling this as one of the customers of NCL as well, not only as a telecom expert or former board member of NTA, but also long-term user of NCL. I've been using NCL phone since 2009.
Thank you. Thank
And
you so
then
much.
17 million customers of NCL share the same view. Please don't be pessimistic, be optimistic. That's the suggestion. And I'm sure the floor will also have a lot of questions around that. Don't take it personally, please.
No, but thank you for being a long-term NCL customer. Really appreciate it.
All right. So now, next question is to Pradeep ji. Although he covered many things in his excellent presentation, quite detailed presentation, and thanks for the good preparation. Still, a couple of questions that I have is, some people in Nepal, they are of the opinion that right now the operators should not go for 5G because 4G is simply not utilized, right? Do you buy that idea? And what NTA is really thinking? What is NTA's perspective on that?
थ्याङ्क यू निकै मार्मिक मैले अलिकति नेपालीमै डिल गर्ने विचार गरेँ किनभने उठिरहेको क्वेसन भएर यसमा चाहिँ तपाईँले निकै मार्मिक कुरा उठाउनु भयो र उहाँको भर्खरको धारणा पनि लगभग त्यही लाइनमै देखियो यसमा चाहिँ हाम्रो धारणा चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि फर्स्ट अफ अल मैले अहिले पनि प्रेजेन्टेसनमा पनि भने हामीले एनटिसी र एनसेल दुवैलाई जति बेला स्पेक्ट्रम दिएको थियौँ त्यति बेला चाहिँ वी हेभ केप्ट सम अब्लिगेसन्स फर्स्ट इफ दोज एब्लिगेसन्स has been fulfilled, still we have time, on time, properly, the 4G network, हाम्रो जुन 4G नेटवर्क छ त्यो चाहिँ धेरै हदसम्म चाहिँ अलिकति रियल 4G भनेर मान्छेले जुन एक्सपिरियन्स गर्न खोजिरहेछ त्यो हदसम्म पुग्छ भन्ने चाहिँ लाग्छ त्यस हुनाले फर्स्ट प्रायोरिटी भनेको चाहिँ एनटिएले हामीले हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ फर्स्टमा रियल 4G को एक्सपिरियन्स कस्टमरसँग पुग्नु पर्यो थ्रु आउट द नेसन नट ओन्ली लिमिटेड इन द सिटिज है त्यो फर्स्ट कुरा हो त्यसपछिबाट अभियसली मैले अहिले पनि भने कस्तो छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ 5G मैले अहिले मेन्सन गर्दाखेरि पनि यसका डिफ्रेन्ट डाइभर्स बिजनेस केसेसहरू छन् यसले इकोनोमीमा डाइरेक्टली अथवा इन्डाइरेक्टली इम्प्याक्ट पार्छ भन्ने कुराहरू धेरै अध्ययनहरूले देखिसकेका छ र यसले डिजिटल ट्रान्सफर्मेसनको जुन रेट र प्रोसेस छ त्यो प्रोसेसलाई चाहिँ फास्ट गराउनको लागि पनि 5G चाहिँ एउटा क्याटलिस्ट अथवा इन्स्ट्रुमेन्ट हो भन्ने कुरामा पनि वर्ल्डमा कसैमा दुविधा छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्दैन र यदि डिजिटल ट्रान्सफर्मेसन भइसकेपछि हामीले आइसिटी बेस्ड इनोभेसनको माध्यमबाट मात्र नै यो देशको चाहिँ आर्थिक सामाजिक मुहार फेर्न सक्छौं भन्ने कुरामा पनि धेरै दुविधा नहोला त्यसकारणले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ वी नीड 5G yes right and current focus should be on the expansion of 4G in full fledged and the next meanwhile and we cannot be late यदि हामी ढिला भयो भने हाम्रो कम्पिटेटिभनेस घट्छ र वी क्यान नट कम्पिट विथ अदर मार्केट. हामी आइसोलेसनमा त छैनौँ नि त. हाम्रो नाइबरहरूसित नि त कम्पिट त गर्नुपर्ने होला हैन. हामी आइसोलेसनमा नभइसकेपछि उनीहरूसित कम्पिट गर्नको लागि चाहिँ हामी दौडेर नगए पनि सुत्यौँ भने त के हुन्छ, अरू कहाँ पुगिसक्छ, एटलिस्ट बायाँ सर्दै त गरौँ. त्यस कारणले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ हाम्रो एनटिएको धारणा के हो, फर्स्ट फेजमा समरीमा फुल फ्लेज 4G with maximum capacity, with best experience, and meanwhile the 5G should start as soon as possible, at least from the key cities, so that our जस्तो रिसर्च गर्नेहरू पनि त्यसमा इन्गेज हुन थाल्छ. हाम्रो कन्टेक्स्टमा कस्तो बिजनेस केस हुने हो त्यसमा पनि मान्छेहरूले रिसर्च त्यो काम गर्न थाल्छ. त्यसपछि ग्रेजुअली त्यो बढ्दै जान्छ अनि त्यसपछि अरू ठाउँमा पनि त्यसको डिमान्डहरू आउँदै क्रिएट हुँदै जान्छ अनि त्यसपछिबाट त्यो थ्रु आउट द नेसन हुन्छ. त्यस कारणले हाम्रो फोकस चाहिँ त्यो डाइरेक्सनमा हो र हामीले चाहिँ त्यो डाइरेक्सनबाट चाहिँ सोचिराखेका छौँ.
All right, one last common question to all three of you, and then I'll open the floor. So today, in the opening plenary session, the minister Honorable Minister also mentioned that India has already declared to be leader in 6G. And I have was the interview of Indian ICT Minister. He said Prime Minister Modi and Government of India is really wants, be the leader of 6G in the world. So just to share, because knowledge is very important and it is a very rare opportunity for us to have distinguished personalities like you. Just share us on where APAC stands in terms of 6G readiness.
Thank you for the question. To be honest and to be frank, when I look at the situation, it's not necessarily to be a leader in adopting a new technology. Some of the countries talks about 6G, whereas others are not ready for 5G. So when it comes to Nepal, the previous question is why 5G? 4G is sufficient at the moment, right?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily to go to 5G or 6G. We are talking about the connectivity to reach out the rural areas, marginalized people.
My question was, since India is really going to be active in 6G, how is the region taking that, APAC region?
Yes, let me answer two questions. What I wanted to say is, the first one is that it's not necessarily mobile technologies for reaching out the rural areas. Some of cases like Thailand, they put Wi-Fi hotspot in the rural areas to provide the connectivity. So it's not necessarily for 5G or 6G or 4G. So it's a mixture of the technology, how to reach out the rural areas. So don't be a leader in terms of 5G or 6G. So the first priority is to connect every people. I think that's the most important thing for Nepali government to consider. The second question about 6G, second answer from my side. 6G is not fully ready in many parts of the world, like Korea and China and some portion of Japan, India include. They are now trying to think about next generation 6G. But it's too early for them because actually 5G in those countries, although I have a 5G phone, I cannot fully get the benefit of 5G at the moment. So because of millimeter, your question to me, 26 gigahertz would be too much, right?
Yes.
I fully understand. And then many cases in USA, they stop the millimeter communication. So because it's very difficult to deploy the network because it's quite expensive in deploying the network, and then there is no ROI. So I think 6G's readiness, I think you need to take a time to deploy 4G fully, and then 5G, like Pradeep mentioned, like a city-wise, and then eventually go to next phase. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Anything you would like to say?
उहाँले भनेकोमा चाहिँ अलमोस्ट त्यही नै हो हामीहरूको लागि चाहिँ मैले त्यहाँ मेन्सन पनि गरेको थिएँ फास्ट मुभर भन्दा नि फास्ट लर्नर हुनुपर्छ भनेर चाहिँ मेन्सन पनि गरिरहेको थिएँ त्यस हुनाले आई थिङ्क स्टिल पिपल आर वर्किङ अन vision of 6G. That's why I think it's quite early since we have not deployed 5G in even 4G in full place. That's why.
Yes, CK, have you been doing any research on 6G, especially for advanced market like Malaysia?
Yeah. Okay, well, this is a personal view, Mani. So please don't quote this as executive view. Why India is adopting 6G, right, is, in my personal view, is because it's about geopolitical supremacy, technology supremacy. That is where, no, I mean, it's a theory. I mean, some of you may say, yeah, CK, you're talking rubbish. But think about it this way. India's, as a country's technology edge is in software, right? They are very good in IT, right? They're the world's best. Today's 5G technology is going to a separate spur into Open RAN, which is on building the 5G stack on ubiquitous computing power. So a lot of the function of 5G is on software. So I think the Indians, in my personal view, think, this is an opportunity to build upon the strengths of the Indian capabilities to challenge the Chinese, because Chinese have a huge hardware capabilities on 5G. Of course, they will go on 6G as well. So you see the same rivalry in Japan and Korea, and of course the United States, who of course don't have any much of a head start. So personal view, sir, I don't know whether it's correct or not.
Thank you very much. So with that, we'll take a couple of questions from the floor. Yes, Anand sir, yes.
This question is for CK and Pradeep. In two of the forums, I made a statement that Nepal can sleep for next 3 to 5 years in terms of commercial 5G deployment. Do you agree or not?
Sorry, just to clarify, your view is next 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years, Nepal can sleep.
Can sleep?
Not even discuss 5G commercial deployment.
No, yes. Adil says within 18 months. 18 months is 1.5 years. So it's ahead of your schedule, sir.
सिके सरसित चाहिँ सरको ठ्याक्कै धारणा मिल्यो त्यो चाहिँ किनभने हो भन्दाखेरि इफ यु थिङ्क फ्रम द बिजनेस एन्ड रिटर्न पोइन्ट अफ भ्यू द्याट्स राइट स्टेटमेन्ट बट हामीले एज अ रेगुलेटर चाहिँ अर्को पनि पर्सपेक्टिभ हेर्नुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई चाहिँ किन भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ 5G को युज केस भनेको 2G, 3G, 4G अथवा एटलिस्ट 4G सम्मको कन्टेक्स्टमा के थियो नि बाहिर जे थियो त्यही ल्याएर यहाँ सिस्टम राखिदियो चलाइदियो त्यसबाट चाहिँ बिजनेस बन्द थियो 5G मा त त्यस्तो हुँदैन नि त हाम्रो कन्टेक्स्टमा त हाम्रो प्रब्लम सल्भ गर्नलाई त कति केसमा त हाम्रो लोकल इनोभेसनहरू चाहिन्छ लोकल कामहरू गर्नुपर्छ त्यसको लागि चाहिँ हामीले कस्तो भन्दाखेरि 5-6 वर्षपछि सुरु गर्यौँ भने अब कस्तो हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ अरू त धेरै माथि पुगिसकेका हुन्छन् हाम्रो कम्पिटिटिभनेस पनि घट्छ मैले भने हामीले चाहिँ के भने भन्नुपर्छ जस्तो लाग्छ अनि मलाई एटलिस्ट सहर केन्द्रित जहाँ चाहिँ सम सर्ट अफ बिजनेस केस पनि हुनसक्छ त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ सुरु गर्दै जाउँ साथसाथै हाम्रो कन्टेक्स्टको लागि चाहिने एप्लिकेसन्सहरू पनि बनाउँदै जाउँ अरू मल्टिस्टेक कोलाबोरेसनहरू गर्दै जाउँ त्यो हिसाबले सोचिएन र सुतेर बसियो भने त आई थिङ्क इट्स क्वाइट पेसिमिस्टिक आइडिया मलाई चाहिँ त्यस्तो लाग्यो है
नेपालको कति ठाउँमा ट्राफिक लाइट छ कति वर्षदेखि हामीले ट्राफिक लाइट सुरु गरेर मलाई थाहा छ आज पनि 8-9 वटा भएको ट्राफिक लाइट चल्दैन अनि हामी अटोमेटेड कारको युज केसको कुरा गरिरहेछौँ
आनन्द सर कोही पनि एउटा क्वेशन पर पार्टिसिपेन्ट प्लिज पर
सरले भनेको कुरा थोरै मैले एन्सर गर्न खोजेँ ठिक छ हामी केही गरेका छैनौँ केही नगरी बसौँ हैन त्यो भन्ने र हाम्रो यो कम्युनिटी र यसले त्यो भन्यो भने हामी कहाँ पुग्याला आई थिङ्क वी हेभ टु थिङ्क डिफरेन्टली
कर्णेल सरको
भेषराज कडेल दूरसञ्चारकै विद्यार्थी हो। मेरो दुईटा प्रश्न छ, दुई तिनवटा भनौँ, मैले समरीमा भन्छु। पहिलो कुरो त हामी 4Gमा रोल आउट धेरै गर्न सकेनौँ भनिरहेछौँ, विस्तार गर्न पर्यो भनिरहेछौँ। यो श्रिङ्केज हुँदै गइरहेछ, पहिला भएको भन्दा अहिले घटिरहेछ त्यसको नेटवर्कको फैलावट। त्यो नक्सामा देखाएको सायद कहिले बनाएको नक्सा हो, त्यो आजको डेमा गऱ्यो भने छैन भन्नेमा म झन्डै विश्वस्त छु मेरो आफ्नो अनुभवले। यो के कारणले भयो एउटा प्रश्न। अर्को प्रश्न के भने एनसिएल चाहिँ भनेको बिओओटी बिल्ड अपरेट अन एन्ड ट्रान्सफर स्किममा भएको, अब ऊ 4-5 वर्ष मात्रै कति छ उसको त्यो लाइसेन्स म्याच्योर हुन, अब उसले लगानी कमै गरिरहेछ मेरो बुझाइ भाइ, आई मे बी रङ। किनभने छोडेर जाने बेला मैले छोडेरै जानुपर्छ भने मैले लगानी किन धेरै गर्ने भन्ने चाहिँ उसको समस्या छ। हो यो कानुनी रूपले त गर्नु परिन्छ, तर यसलाई यो विषयलाई एड्रेस कसरी गर्ने भनेर चाहिँ यो उसले गरिरहेछ कि छैन एनटिएले। स्पेक्ट्रमको कुरा आयो। अब अर्को प्रश्न, 5G को निम्ति नेपाल टेलिकममा 60 मेगाहर्ज ब्यान्डविड्थ दियो, तर एनसिएलले मागेको नदिनको के कारण होला? किनभने हामीले दुईटा अपरेटरमालाई भिन्नता गर्न त हुँदैन। नेपाल टेलिकमले कति 1.5 वर्षभन्दा कति भइसक्यो पाएको, खै त्यो 5G चलाएको भन्ने पनि मैले महसुस गर्न सकेको छैन, कुनै मैले नचला भएर हो कि त्यो स्थिति छ। त्यसकारण चाहिँ यो कसरी चाहिँ 4G विस्तार गर्ने भन्ने कुरो चाहिँ एक्सपान्ड गर्ने भन्ने धेरै कुरा त भयो। यहाँ धेरैजनाले भन्नुभयो 4G नै हामीले त्यसमै फोकस गर्नुपर्छ, 5G को निम्ति यस वी आर नट रेडी, म पनि त्यसमा सहमत छु। केही हदमा चाहिँ यो आनन्द खनालजीले भनेको जस्तै पनि हो, तर टेक्नोलोजिकल अब्सोलेन्स 4G भयो भने हामी 5Gमा त नगए हुँदैन। किन अब हामीले मर्मत सम्मार पाक पूर्जा किन्न कतैबाट पाएनौँ भने 4G भनेर 5 वर्षसम्म राख्ने कुरो त हुँदैन। त्यसकारण केही चाहिँ सिक्नको निम्ति हामीसँग अलिकति त्यसको नलेज हुनको निम्ति त्यसका चाहिँ यो इन्ट्रोड्युस गरे मात्रै नै त्यसका चाहिँ के एप्लिकेसन हुँदो रहेछन् भन्ने थाहा हुन्छ। त्यसकारण सानो नेटवर्क एक्सपेरिमेन्टल नेटवर्क भए पनि गर्नुपर्छ। त्यस अर्थमा म पौडेलजीको भनाइसँग पूर्ण रूपले सहमत छु। हामीले व्यापक रूपमा चाहिँ आश नगरौँ, तर चाहिँ पाइलटको रूपमा भए पनि कहीँ चाहिँ एक्सपर्टिज डेभलप गर्न, त्यससँग भर्टिकल इन्डस्ट्रीहरूसँग चाहिँ कोलाबोरेसन गरेर यसका उपयोगिता के छन् भन्न, मार्केट चाहिँ बनाउन पनि, मार्केट चाहिँ सिर्जना पनि गर्नुपर्छ। सिर्जना गर्नको निम्ति त्यो नभइकन हुँदैन भन्ने मेरो
अलिकति छोट्याउँछ
भन्दै मेरो टुङ्ग्याउँछु। धन्यवाद।
अब हामी टाइम अलिकति वी आर रनिङ आउट अफ टाइम, सो आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट प्रदीपजी टु आन्सर इन 1 or 2 minutes।
धन्यवाद हाम्रो सरलाई। एकदम निकै गम्भीर एन्सरै दिन गाह्रो गर्ने किसिमको क्वेसन चाहिँ सोध्नुभयो, तर म प्रयास चाहिँ गर्छु। एनिवे, जस्तो 4G को पछिल्लो चरणमा चाहिँ एकदम जनमानसबाट पनि यो गुनासो चाहिँ आइरहेको छ। त्यसपछि हामीले एनटिएको पनि रेकर्ड हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ पहिला जस्तो त्यो उपकरणहरू ल्याउने त्यो गर्ने त्यति धेरै चाहिँ बेसिकली देखिएको पनि छैन, भनेको इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेभलपमेन्ट र इन्भेस्टमेन्ट चाहिँ गरिरहेको पनि देखिँदैन। अनि त्यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ क्वालिटीमा केही न केही गिरावट आएको भन्ने आम उपभोक्ताको पनि जनगुनासो छ हैन। त्यो चाहिँ सरले भन्नुभएको चाहिँ सिङ्क हुनुमा सरले पनि एन्सर दिइहाल्नु भयो, त्यही नै एन्सरै भयो जस्तो लाग्यो। किनभने उहाँहरूको हामी कोठा बसिरहेको छौँ, घर छोडेर हिँड्न छ भने कसले कोठा थप पर्दा सर्दा राखिरहेको छ, बरु चाहिँ भएकै पर्दा पनि लिएर हिँड्न बेर लाग्दैन मान्छेले। त्यो पनि हो कि त्यो पर्सपेक्टिभ पनि होला। एनिवे, त्यो कुरामा चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ अवेर छौँ जस्तो लाग्छ। किन भन्दाखेरि बिहान हाम्रो गौरव सरले पनि धेरैचोटि मेन्सन गर्नुभयो, हामीले एक्ट एमेन्डमेन्टको लागि चाहिँ प्रोसेस अथवा अगाडि बढिरहेको चाहिँ देखिन्छ। अब एक्ट होला नहोला के होला भनेर फेरि कुरिराख्ने अवस्था नै भएन। अनि त्यस कारणले गर्दाखेरि एनटिएले विद्यमान फ्रिक्वेन्सी पोलिसीमै पनि एउटा चाहिँ अक्सन गरेर नयाँ अपरेटर भित्राउन सकिने व्यवस्था चाहिँ छ। त्यही व्यवस्थालाई चाहिँ अलिकति थप व्याख्या गरेर चाहिँ त्यसमै टेकेर भए पनि नयाँ एउटा अपरेटर नल्याइ भएन भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ हामीलाई फिल भयो। अब बिहान एनसेलको सारहरूले त भन्नुभयो ड्युपल मार्केट भन्दाखेरि आपत्ति जनाउनु भयो, तर मोबाइल मार्केटमा हेर्ने दुईवटा अपरेटर 98% भन्दा बढी सेयर भएपछि इकोनोमिक्समा के भनिन्छ मलाई चाहिँ थाहा भएन। मलाई मेरो विचारमा ड्युपल नै भनिन्छ त्यो हैन त्यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ डिओपोली मार्केटबाट कम्पिटिसनमा लानको लागि चाहिँ अब त्यो मैले भर्खर भने त्यसमा चाहिँ के व्याख्या गरेर चाहिँ फ्रिक्वेन्सी अक्सन गरेर भए पनि तत्कालै चाहिँ अर्को अपरेटर नभएको अवस्था चाहिँ एनटिएले चाहिँ रियलाइज गरेको छ र त्यसतर्फ चाहिँ एनटिएबाट बोर्डबाट निर्णय भएर उता मन्त्रालयतिर चाहिँ थप व्याख्याको लागि चाहिँ पठाएको अवस्था पनि हो। त्यस हुनाले हामी रेगुलेटर यसमा अवेर अथवा सेन्सिटिभ नभएको भन्ने चाहिँ होइन। नम्बर 2 मा चाहिँ अब सरले अर्को क्वेसन उठाउनु भयो एनसेललाई चाहिँ किन नदिएको भन्ने हकमा। त्यति बेला कस्तो भयो भन्दाखेरि ठ्याक्क त्यो समितिको बैठक थियो सर, म स्वयं त्यो बैठकमा उपस्थित थिएँ। त्यति बेला एनटिएले प्रस्ताव लाने बेलामा हामीले त अभियसली सबैको लागि हुने गरी लिएर गएका थियौँ। एनटिसी एनसेल जोसुकैलाई पनि दूरसञ्चार सेवालाई छुट्याएको फ्रिक्वेन्सीभित्र रहेर एनटिएबाट चाहिँ स्वीकृति दिने गरी जनरल रूपमा नै लिएर गएको थियौँ। तर त्यहाँ कस्तो भने मिटिङमा चाहिँ कुरा समिति सरलाई थाहा छँदैछ, त्यसको स्ट्रक्चर पनि थाहा छ। अनि त्यहाँ चाहिँ कुरा हुँदै गर्दा अहिलेसम्म फर्मल्ली निवेदन कोबाट आएछ त भन्ने कुरा उठ्यो। त्यसपछि फर्मल्ली त्यो मितिसम्म चाहिँ फर्मल निवेदन एनटिसीसम्म आएको भएको भएर हामीले अन्यथा भन्न मिल्ने कुरा नि भएन, भन्ने कुरा पनि भएन। भनेपछि एनटिसीबाट आएछ भनेपछि अरूलाई किन दिनु पर्यो त, उसमा अहिलेलाई एनटिसी दिउँ भनेर चाहिँ त्यो दियो। त्यसपछि पनि मिटिङहरू बस्यो एउटा, त्यसमा कुनै पनि निर्णय भएन। त्यसपछि खासै त्यो पोलिटिकल यताउता चेन्ज पनि भयो, त्यसले गर्दा त्यो समितिको मिटिङ पनि बस्न सकेन। तथापि फेरि प्राधिकरणले चाहिँ बोर्डबाट निर्णय गरेर चाहिँ समितिमा चाहिँ यो सबैको लागि खोल्ने गरी चाहिँ संशोधन गर्न भनेर चाहिँ प्रस्ताव चाहिँ